What happens when a gate agent, drunk on her own small power, decides to play judge, jury, and executioner with a passenger's life? She sees a black woman in simple clothes and assumes the worst. She decides her passport is fake and, in a fit of rage, rips the document to shreds, destroying her trip. But she made one fatal mistake. The woman she just humiliated wasn't a tourist. She was a high-level federal inspector in disguise, and she just watched that agent commit a career-ending, life-altering crime. Get ready, because the karma in this story isn't just fast. It's nuclear. The air in Concourse C of Chicago O'Hare was a toxic soup. You could taste the anxiety, a metallic tang on the tongue that mixed with the sour scent of stale coffee, pretzel grease, and the faint, chemical-sweet smell of industrial carpet cleaner. It was 6:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the world was falling apart, one delayed flight at a time. A violent thunderstorm system over Lake Michigan had thrown O'Hare's delicate, brutal ecosystem into chaos. At gate C-28, the atmosphere was particularly venomous. Transcontinental Airlines Flight 881 to London Heathrow was already 3 hours delayed. The gate lice, those desperate to be first on the plane, were a congealed mass around the podium, their faces pinched with frustration. Businessmen in rumpled suits muttered into their phones, their voices sharp with a failing sense of importance. A family with 2 screaming toddlers had given up, the parents sitting zombie-like on the floor, surrounded by a fortress of Cinnabon wrappers and crushed goldfish. Dr. Iris Thorne sat 30 feet away, her back against a charging station, pretending to read a worn paperback. To anyone who bothered to look, she was a non-entity. She wore simple grey sweatpants, a faded Northwestern University hoodie, and a pair of non-prescription glasses that she used to ward off conversation. Her hair was pulled back into a simple tight bun. Her backpack was a scuffed, decade-old JanSport. She was the definition of blending in, a face you would forget the instant you looked away. This was, of course, the entire point. Iris was not a tourist. She was not a graduate student. She was Federal Inspector 09, Office of Special Audits, Federal Aviation Administration. She was, in layman's terms, a red team auditor. Her job was to fly commercial, in disguise, and look for the cracks. Not the cracks in the fuselage, but the cracks in the human system that held the entire enterprise of air travel together. She was a professional observer, a walking, talking stress test, and her focus, for the last 3 hours, had been on the woman behind the podium at gate C-28. Brenda Scaife, Senior Customer Service Agent, Team Lead. She wore her bright red TCA uniform jacket like a suit of armor, and her name badge was polished to a high sheen. She was a woman in her late 40s, with aggressively blonde highlighted hair, pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin over her cheekbones. Her face, at the moment, was a mask of pure, unadulterated contempt. Iris had been making notes in a small, coded journal. 1742. Agent Scaife denied boarding to elderly passenger, Mr. Henderson, per overheard conversation, due to a ticket printer error. Scaife was visibly hostile, refused to reissue ticket at the gate, and directed him to the main terminal help desk, knowing this would cause him to miss the flight. Clear violation of Customer Bill of Rights, Section 4.2. 18:05, Agent Scaife made the pre-boarding announcement for passengers with disabilities. Her voice was mumbled, her pace was too fast, and she did not face the passenger area. The announcement was effectively unintelligible. A passenger in a wheelchair, Mr. Davies, and his wife were ignored for a full 10 minutes when they approached the podium for assistance. Procedural failure. 1822. Agent Scaife engaged in a loud, unprofessional argument with her co-worker, a younger man named Tom Alvarez. Scaife's voice was audible up to 40 feet away, using profanity. "I don't give a damn what the system says. This creates an unsafe, hostile work environment and distracts from security-critical duties." 1831. Agent Scaife left the jet bridge door unsecured, latch disengaged, while she stepped away to yell at a passenger who asked about a voucher. Aris watched Brenda slam her phone down into its cradle. She was a metrics employee. Aris had seen her file. Brenda's performance was judged on 2 things: on-time departures, OTD, and baggage fees collected. Passengers were not people. They were obstacles to her bonus. And today, the weather was killing her OTD. She was taking it out on everyone. "This is the final announcement," Brenda barked into the microphone, her voice a piercing shriek that made the toddlers burst into fresh wails. "We are now boarding all groups. All groups. If you are not in this line in 5 minutes, I am closing the door. We are leaving. You." This was another violation. Announcing a final call to rush passengers was a known stressor. But it was also the cue Aris had been waiting for. She slowly zipped her paperback into her bag, slung the backpack over one shoulder, and joined the disorganized herd moving toward the gate. She got in line behind the businessman, who was still complaining. "This is an absolute disgrace. I am Global Services, you know. Global Services." Brenda didn't even look up from her screen. "Next!" she snapped. The businessman scanned his phone. The machine beeped. "Have a nice flight," Brenda said, her voice dripping with the exact opposite sentiment. Aris stepped up. She handed Brenda her boarding pass, a simple paper one she'd printed at a kiosk, and her dark blue, official United States passport. Brenda snatched them. Her eyes scanned the boarding pass, then darted to her screen. Her fingers, with their long, crimson-red acrylic nails, tapped on the keyboard, a sound like angry insects. "Aris Thorne," she said, mispronouncing the first name as is. "It's Aris," Aris corrected, softly, politely. Brenda's eyes, a flat, cold grey, snapped up from the screen to meet Aris's. It was the first time she had made direct eye contact, and in that moment, Aris saw it. The flicker. It was the look Aris had seen 1,000 times in 1,000 different contexts. It was the "you don't belong here" look. The "who are you to correct me" look. It was the look that saw a black woman in a hoodie and glasses and immediately filed her under problem. Brenda's lip curled into a sneer. Uh-huh. She looked back at her screen. Tap. "I'm going to need to ask you to step aside, ma'am." Aris feigned polite confusion. "Oh? Is there a problem with my seat?" "Step aside," Brenda commanded, gesturing to a small, empty space by the wall, away from the podium and the flow of passengers. "Tom, take over," she snapped at her young colleague, who jumped as if startled. Aris complied, moving to the designated spot. She kept her expression mild, slightly worried, but her heart had begun to beat a low, steady drum. This is it. She was no longer just an observer. The system was now interacting with her. And it was failing. Tom Alvarez was barely 23. He had the telltale look of a recent college graduate who had discovered his communications degree was worth approximately the paper it was printed on. He was drowning. He fumbled with the scanner, his hands visibly shaking as he tried to manage the line of impatient passengers. "Sorry, sir, just scan it again," he stammered. Brenda Scaife ignored him. She strode over to Aris, her arms crossed, the passport and boarding pass still clutched in one hand. She was, Aris noted, projecting her power. She was standing too close, violating personal space, forcing Aris to look up at her. "What is the purpose of your trip to the United Kingdom, Ms. Thorne?" Brenda asked, her voice low and accusatory, as if she were an MI5 agent. "I'm attending an academic conference," Aris replied calmly, using the cover story that was backed by a full, verifiable, and entirely fabricated registration at a real symposium on aeronautical engineering. "An academic conference," Brenda repeated, drawing the words out. She looked Aris up and down, her gaze lingering on the worn hoodie. "On what, exactly?" "Fluid dynamics," Aris said, without missing a beat. Brenda's eyes narrowed. She was clearly not expecting a complex, specific answer. She had expected, "visiting my cousin," or "a vacation." She was trying to catch Aris in a lie, but Aris's cover was a steel trap. "Uh-huh. And where are you staying in London?" "The Mayfair Hotel, near Green Park," Aris said. "That's a very expensive hotel." "Very expensive," Brenda said, her implication hanging thick and heavy in the air. "How could you afford that?" "My university is covering the cost," Aris said, maintaining her placid, non-threatening expression. She was a lamb for the slaughter. This was the test. How does a stressed employee, armed with implicit bias and a bad attitude, handle a situation she has created? Does she de-escalate and follow procedure, or does she double down? Brenda doubled down. She opened the passport. She held it up to the fluorescent lights, angling it back and forth. It was a perfectly valid, new-generation passport, complete with a biometric chip and a complex holographic overlay. Aris had been through customs in Dubai, Beijing, and Moscow with it. It was pristine. "This photo," Brenda said, tapping her long red nail against the polycarbonate data page. "It doesn't look like you." Aris resisted the urge to sigh. "It was taken 2 years ago, but I can assure you, that is me." "Your skin tone is different," Brenda said. "Lighter. In the picture." The audacity of the statement sucked the air out of Aris's lungs for a brief second. "There it is." "The quiet part," said Loud. "It's just the lighting at the passport office, I'm sure," Aris said, her voice a shade cooler. "And this lamination," Brenda said, ignoring the comment. She began to pick at the edge of the data page with her acrylic nail. Aris felt a jolt of genuine alarm. "Ma'am, please be careful," Aris said, her tone shifting from polite to firm. "That is a federally issued document. You are not authorized to tamper with it." The word tamper lit a fire in Brenda's eyes. The word authorized was a bucket of gasoline. "I am an agent of this airline," Brenda hissed, her face now inches from Aris's. "I am authorized to do whatever it takes to ensure the safety of my flight. And this document," she held it up, "is a fake." "It is not a fake," Aris stated, her voice now flat and cold. "You can run it. You can call customs. But you cannot, and you will not, damage that passport." "Oh, I won't?" Brenda's voice was a triumphant sneer. She had been building to this moment all day. She had been looking for a target, for some way to exercise the one tiny sliver of control she had over her miserable, chaotic world. And Aris, with her calm voice and her university hoodie, was it? "This," Brenda announced to the empty wall beside her, "is what we do with forgeries." She did not rip the whole passport in half. What she did was, in many ways, worse. It was more deliberate, more intimate. With a sharp, violent twist of her wrist, she bent the rigid polycarbonate data page. She used her long, claw-like nail as a lever, jamming it under the lamination layer where it met the binding, and with a sound like a heavy-duty zipper being torn, she peeled. She delaminated the entire data page, separating the plastic coating from the paper beneath. The holographic dove, the intricate security fibers, the micro-printing. All of it was destroyed, turned into a milky, bubbled wreck. Then, for good measure, she tore a corner off the page itself, severing the machine-readable zone's first few characters. The passport was not just damaged, it was murdered. Time, for Iris Thorne, didn't slow down. It became crystalline. In the space of 3 seconds, her mind, trained for observation and analysis, processed a flood of data. Data point 1. The sound. A brittle, catastrophic shruk rip. It was a sound that cut through the ambient hubbub of the gate, the announcements, the crying toddlers, the rolling bags. Data point 2. The reaction of Tom Alvarez. The young agent, who had been struggling to scan a family's tickets, froze. His eyes widened, and he made a small, choking sound, like a gasp that died in his throat. His face went bone white. He knew, instinctively, that a line had been crossed from which there was no return. Data point 3. The passengers. Several people in the remaining line stopped and turned. A woman in a pink tracksuit had her phone out, though it was unclear if she was filming before the rip or had just raised it in response. The electronic hum of the gate was suddenly, profoundly silent. Data point 4. Brenda Scaife. Her face was a rictus of triumphant rage. Her chest was heaving. She held the mutilated passport aloft like a hunter displaying a trophy. She was breathing hard through her nose. She had done it. She had won. Iris Thorne did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She did not lunge for the woman. Her training, her entire professional life, had been about emotional containment in the face of catastrophe. You don't scream in the cockpit when an engine fails. You run the checklist. Iris ran her checklist. Her first move was to secure the evidence. She held out her hand, palm up. Her voice, when it came, was as calm and cold as the bottom of the ocean. "Give it to me." Brenda, still high on her power trip, scoffed. "I'm not giving you this fake. Give me what is left of my property." Iris interrupted, her voice not rising, but gaining an impossible density. It was the voice of pure, unadulterated command. Brenda's bravado faltered for the first time. She looked at the ruined document in her hand, then at the silent, staring faces of the other passengers. A flicker of something crossed her face. Not regret. Not yet. But perhaps the first, dawning comprehension of the scale of her action. She didn't hand it to Iris. She threw it. The passport and the small torn corner landed on the industrial grey carpet between them. Iris bent, slowly, and picked up the pieces. She inspected the damage. The biometric chip was exposed. The data page was unreadable. The machine-readable zone was destroyed. It was no longer a travel document. It was garbage. She carefully placed the pieces in the front pocket of her hoodie. Then she looked directly into Brenda Scaife's eyes. "Brenda Scaife," Iris said, reading the name from her polished badge. "You have, at approximately 1841 Central Time, knowingly and willfully destroyed a United States passport. That is a federal crime." Brenda's face, which had been pale, now flushed a deep, mottled crimson. "How dare you? You come in here with a fake ID." "It was not a fake ID," Iris said. "It was the property of the U.S. government, issued to me. You have destroyed it." "I am calling security," Brenda shrieked, finally turning to the phone on the podium. She was unholstering her last and most potent weapon, the hysterical passenger report. "Tom, call 911. This woman is threatening me. She's trying to breach security." Tom was frozen. He just stared, his mouth slightly open. "I am not threatening you," Iris said, her voice cutting through Brenda's performance. "I am stating a fact. You have committed a felony under Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 1543, and you have done so in front of at least a dozen witnesses." This was a mistake, from Iris's disguised perspective. A normal passenger wouldn't know the U.S. Code, but Iris was so deep in her inspector role, so appalled by the blatant criminality, that the citation slipped out. Brenda, however, didn't catch the slip. She was too busy with her own panic. She fumbled with the phone. "We have a security breach. Gate C28. A passenger is refusing to comply and has become violent." Aris hadn't moved a muscle. She hadn't taken a step. She hadn't even gesticulated. She was a statue of forced calm. Within 60 seconds, O'Hare's response time was, at least, excellent. Two things happened simultaneously. Two airport police officers, Officer Kowalski and Officer Chen, came thudding up the concourse, and the jet bridge door opened, and Captain Miles Patterson, the pilot for Flight 881, emerged. Patterson was in his late 50s, with silver-grey hair and a crisp uniform that spoke of military discipline. He had the no-nonsense look of a man who had flown for 25 years and had seen it all. He had come out to find out why the last 20 passengers hadn't boarded, and why he could hear shouting over his open cockpit door. He arrived just as Officer Kowalski, a beefy man with a walrus mustache, stepped in front of Aris. "What's the problem here?" Kowalski demanded, his hand already on his belt. Brenda pointed a trembling, crimson nail at Aris. "That woman. She tried to board with a fraudulent passport. When I confiscated it, she became aggressive. She threatened me. She's probably a terrorist." The word terrorist hung in the air, a final, desperate, nuclear option. Kowalski and Chen immediately shifted their stance, soft hands turning to hard hands. They now saw Aris not as a passenger, but as a threat. "Ma'am," Kowalski said, his voice hard, "put your hands behind your back." "Officers," Aris said, moving slowly, "I have not threatened anyone. I have not been violent. Your gate agent, however, just destroyed my passport. I am the victim of a crime." "You can tell us all about it down at the station," Chen said, pulling out a pair of zip ties. "Wait," Captain Patterson said, holding up a hand. His voice was a deep baritone that commanded immediate authority. The cops paused. Brenda paused. Patterson looked at Aris. He looked at her worn-out hoodie and her calm, intelligent eyes. He looked at Brenda, who was vibrating with a toxic mix of adrenaline and fear. Then he looked at the floor and saw nothing. "Where?" the captain asked. "Is the passport in question?" Aris, moving with deliberate slowness so as not to be perceived as a threat, reached into her hoodie pocket. Kowalski's hand went to his taser. "Easy, lady." Aris pulled out the ruined pieces. "This," she said, holding the delaminated page and the torn corner in her open palm. "This was my passport, until your agent, Ms. Scaife, destroyed it." Captain Patterson's eyes widened. He took the pieces from Aris. He was a pilot. He knew documents. He knew what a data page was supposed to look like, and this one was annihilated. He looked at the torn corner. "Brenda," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Did you do this?" Brenda, seeing her absolute authority at the gate being challenged by the only person who outranked her, tried to rally. "Captain, it was a fake. The lamination was peeling. I was testing it, and it fell apart. It was a poor forgery." The lie was, Aris had to admit, a good one, plausible. It fell apart in my hands' defense, but Aris was ready. "That is not true," Aris said, looking at the captain. She said, and I quote, "This is what we do with forgeries." Then she intentionally and maliciously tore it. The agent, she pointed at Tom Alvarez, who looked like he was about to vomit, saw the entire thing, as did the passengers. Patterson looked at Tom. "Son? Is that what happened?" Tom Alvarez looked at his boss, Brenda, who was staring at him with eyes that promised murder. He looked at the two cops, he looked at the pilot, and he broke. I don't," he stammered. "It happened so fast. I just looked over, and it was ripped. Brenda smiled, a tiny, toxic smirk. Her witness had folded. "Right," Kowalski said, sensing the tide had turned back. "Ma'am, you're coming with us." "Captain," Aris said, appealing to the only sane person in the group, "I am a U.S. citizen, being detained for—" "What exactly?" Patterson looked at the ruined passport in his hand. He sighed, the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was a pragmatist. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was genuinely regretful. "I don't know who did what here. That's for them to sort out. But what I do know is this. I cannot, by federal and international law, allow you to board my aircraft bound for the United Kingdom with a travel document in this condition. It is invalid. You would be denied entry, and the airline would be fined tens of thousands of dollars. You are not flying to London tonight." He handed the ruined pieces back to Aris. "Brenda," he said, turning to the gate agent, "close the door. We're done here." "Officer," he nodded to Kowalski. "This is a gate management issue now. She is no longer my passenger. She's yours." And with that, Captain Miles Patterson turned, walked back onto the jet bridge, and closed the door. The final thud of the heavy door sealing was the sound of Aris's last hope of a simple resolution. "Well," Brenda said, her voice positively dripping with venomous pleasure, "you heard the man. She's all yours." "Ma'am," Kowalski said, stepping forward, "please come with us. We'll get your statement at the substation." Aris looked at Brenda Scaife. The woman was beaming, a smile of pure, spiteful victory. She had won. She had identified a problem, confronted it, and eliminated it. She had protected her flight. Aris Thorne, the civilian, the academic, was gone. Inspector 009, the federal auditor, was now fully in control. "Very well, officer," Aris said, her voice clear and calm. "I will come with you. I would like to make a phone call." "You'll get one," Officer Chen said, gesturing for her to walk. "Let's go. And you?" he said to Brenda. "You'll need to come down later to file a full report on this." "Oh, I will," Brenda said, already turning back to her computer to finalize the flight manifest. "Believe me, I will." As Aris was escorted away from the gate, walking past the staring passengers, she was not shamed. She was not angry. She was calculating. The Red Team integrity test had produced a result she had never, in her wildest dreams, anticipated. The system had not just failed. It had committed a crime against the very government it was supposed to be serving. Brenda Scaife, in her fit of pique, had no idea what she had just done. She hadn't just ripped a passport. She had pulled the pin on a grenade. The O'Hare substation was not a station so much as a series of connected, windowless rooms in the bowels of Terminal 2. It smelled of burnt popcorn and nervous sweat. Officer Kowalski led Aris to a small, beige interview room, furnished with a single, bolted-down table and 3 hard plastic chairs. "Have a seat," he said. His tone was bored. The adrenaline was gone. To him, this was now just paperwork. "You want a water? Coffee?" "A water would be appreciated. Thank you, officer," Aris said. He left, leaving the door open. Officer Chen stood outside, observing, but also clearly relaxing. To them the threat was over. Aris was a talker, not a fighter. Kowalski returned with a small plastic bottle of Pure Flight brand water. "So," he said, sitting down opposite her and pulling out a tablet. "Let's get your side of it. Full name." "Aris Isan Thorne," she said. "And you're alleging the gate agent, Brenda Scaife, destroyed your passport." "I am not alleging it, officer. I am stating it as a fact," Aris said. "She did." "Right," Kowalski sighed. "Look, lady, Dr. Thorne, whatever. Here's how this goes. You say she ripped it. She says it was a fake and fell apart. Her little buddy, he glanced at his notes. Tom Alvarez says he didn't see anything. And the captain, who is the only guy with real juice in this situation, says he can't take you. So, best case scenario for you. We file a report. Your airline gives you a hotel voucher, and you go to the passport office in the morning. Worst case, Ms. Scaife decides to press charges for harassment and making threats, which, he held up a finger, is her right. She's a uniformed employee, which gives her special protections. Iris let him finish. She let the entire, flawed, biased, system-protecting speech hang in the air. She understood. The system was not designed to protect her. It was designed to protect itself. The airline, the police, the airport, they were a tribe, and she was an outsider. I understand, Iris said, taking a sip of water. I did, however, request a phone call. Yeah, sure, Kowalski said, gesturing to the phone on the wall. Local calls are free. You need a directory. No, thank you, Iris said, pulling out her own, simple, burner cell phone. It was not her government-issued BlackBerry, which was zipped into a hidden pocket in her backpack. This was her disguise phone. Whoa, not that, Chen said from the doorway. You make the call on the wall phone. Policy. We don't know what. Apps. You got on that thing. Iris nodded. Of course. I just need to retrieve a number from it. She powered it on, navigated to her contacts, and found the one she needed. She then put the phone back in her pocket, stood, and walked to the wall phone. The officers watched, unconcerned. They were expecting a call to a frantic husband, a high-priced lawyer, or a confused friend. Iris punched in the 10-digit number. It was a Washington, D.C. area code. It rang twice. This is Cole, a sharp, awake voice answered. It was 7:51 p.m. in Chicago, 8:51 p.m. in D.C. Mr. Cole, this is Observer 9, Iris said, her voice clear and formal. In the D.C. office of Julian Cole, the deputy administrator of the FAA, everything stopped. Cole, who had been halfway out the door to a charity dinner, froze. Observer 9 was Iris Thorne, and she never called him mid-audit. Ever. Observer 9, identify and authenticate, he said, his voice dropping an octave. Authentication 3 Delta. Bravo, Iris replied. My status is compromised. We have a code Samson at O'Hare. Julian Cole's blood turned to ice. Code Samson. It was a designation they had come up with during a Red Team training exercise. It was a joke based on the biblical story. It meant an auditor had identified a flaw so catastrophic and had been so compromised by it that they were bringing the pillars of the temple down on everyone's head. It meant the auditor had been stopped, not by a simple procedural error, but by a willful, malicious, or criminal act from within. It had never, ever been used in the field. Go to a secure line, Cole snapped. That is not possible, Iris said, her eyes on Officer Kowalski, who was now looking at her with a flicker of curiosity. I am in the O'Hare substation, Terminal 2. I am being detained by airport police on suspicion of harassment. Cole's mind was racing. Who detained you? Officers Kowalski and Chen, at the request of Transcontinental Airlines, Senior Agent Brenda Scaife, Gate C-28. What was the compromising event, Observer 9? Cole's voice was now arctic. Agent Scaife has physically destroyed my federal travel document, Iris said. There was a full 3 seconds of dead, heavy silence on the line. Julian Cole, a man who had handled mid-air emergencies and congressional inquiries, was speechless. She what? She has destroyed my U.S. passport, delaminated, and tore the data page. I am, as a result, unable to complete my audit flight. I am now in the custody of local authorities, who are treating this as a customer service dispute. Kowalski, hearing the words "federal travel document" and "custody," suddenly sat up straight. He was starting to realize this was not a call to Mum. "Aris," Julian said, dropping the call sign. "Who is in the room with you?" "Officer Kowalski. Officer Chen is at the door." "Put Officer Kowalski on the line." Aris held the receiver out to Kowalski. "He would like to speak to you." Kowalski looked at the phone as if it were a snake. Who is he?" "He is Deputy Administrator Julian Cole, Federal Aviation Administration, Washington, D.C., Aris said flatly. Kowalski's face, a ruddy, complacent pink, went the color of drywall. He stumbled to his feet and took the phone. "This is Officer Kowalski." "Yes, sir. Yes, sir. She's right here." "No, sir. She is not under arrest. She is assisting us with an inquiry." Kowalski was visibly sweating now. "A dispute with a gate agent." "Yes, sir. The passport." "Yes, sir, I have seen it. It's destroyed, sir." "No, sir. No, sir, I did not see it happen. We arrived after." Kowalski was now standing at rigid attention, nodding at the phone. "Yes, sir, I understand. Yes, sir, perfectly. I will tell her right now." "Yes, sir." He hung up the phone, his hand trembling slightly. He did. His face was a mask of professional panic. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice a full octave higher. My profound apologies. You are, of course, not being detained. You are free to go." "I am not going anywhere," Aris said, sitting back down. "I am waiting for my colleagues to arrive. Mr. Cole informed me, I assume, that he is making some calls?" Yes, Kowalski stammered. "He mentioned he was spinning up the O'Hare Field office." "Good," Aris said. "Then I will wait. You, however, should do two things immediately. First, you will retrieve my backpack, which is still at gate C28. Second, you will secure the CCTV footage from the gate, the podium camera, and the main concourse before it is accidentally erased." The airline controls those," Kowalski said. "And you are the airport police," Aris countered. "You will go to the TCA manager on duty, Richard Geller, and you will tell him he is to preserve all video data from gate C28 from 18 Aus to 19 Ursa by order of the FAA. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Kowalski said. A ma'am this time. "Go," Aris commanded. Kowalski and Chen practically sprinted out of the room. Aris Thorne, Inspector 009, was left alone in the beige room with her bottle of water. She took a sip. Flight 881 was, by now, probably over the coast of Canada. Captain Patterson was sipping his cockpit coffee. Brenda Scaife was probably closing out her shift, feeling smug and victorious. The pillars were, indeed, about to come down. Julian Cole hung up the phone and stood, motionless, in his office for 5 seconds. He did not shout. He did not panic. He simply processed. One of his best field agents, a woman with a PhD from MIT and a spine of pure titanium, was in a police holding room because a 20-an-hour gate agent had a power trip. He picked up his other phone, the red one, the secure line. He made 3 calls in 90 seconds. Call 1, Helen Pierce, Airport Director, O'Hare International. "Helen, Julian Cole, I have a problem, which means you have a problem. I have an FAA Red Team auditor, call sign Observer 9, who has been unlawfully detained at your Terminal 2 substation. She was compromised by a transcontinental employee at Gate C28. She is unharmed, but her federal documents have been destroyed. I mean, destroyed, as in by an airline employee on camera. Helen Pierce, a woman who managed a city of 50,000 employees and 200,000 passengers daily, felt her stomach drop. A Red Team auditor? On her watch? "Julian," she said, her voice all business. "Where is she? What does she need?" "She's in your substation," Julian said, "and she needs you. I want you, and I want the head of your TSA detail. And I want the Chicago Port Authority Police Commissioner at that substation 10 minutes ago. I am sending my own field team. But you are on the ground. This is a code Samson, Helen. I want a full-spectrum lockdown on all evidence related to Transcontinental, Gate C28 for the last 6 hours. CCTV, audio, employee logs, everything." "Understood," Helen said, already grabbing her coat. "I'm on my way. Call 2. Michael Vance, Vice President of North American Operations, Transcontinental Airlines." Vance was at a steakhouse, celebrating his daughter's birthday. His phone vibrated with the "do not ignore" signal. He excused himself. "Michael Vance." "Michael, this is Julian Cole. I'm calling to inform you that your airline is, as of this moment, under full administrative review by the FAA. I am grounding all transcontinental operations at O'Hare, pending a full systems—" "Wait. No." Cole paused. That was too much. It would punish the passengers. He recalibrated. "Michael, I am calling to inform you that your employee, Brenda Scaife, team lead at Gate C28, has just committed a federal felony. She has physically destroyed the passport of an FAA inspector. I currently have 2 federal marshals en route to your airport to take her into custody." Vance choked on nothing. He just choked. "What? Julian, that's impossible. It must be a mistake." "The mistake, Michael, was in your hiring, your training, and your culture. Your mistake is currently bragging to her co-workers while my inspector is being treated like a criminal. You have 1 hour. I want your senior VP of standards, your head of O'Hare Hub operations, that's Richard Geller, I believe, and your entire C28 gate team, including Ms. Scaife and a Mr. Tom Alvarez, in your main conference room. And you will wait there until my people arrive. And Michael, if Ms. Scaife disappears, or goes home sick, or can't be reached, I will personally pull your airline's operating certificate before midnight." Vance hung up the phone, his face pale. He walked back to the table. "Honey," he said to his wife, "the party's over. I have to go to the airport. Right now." "Call 3, U.S. Federal Marshals Service, Chicago Field Office." This call was brief. It was a formal request for assistance in the detention of a civilian for the willful destruction of government property. Back at O'Hare, the first domino to fall was Richard Geller. Geller was the TCA hub manager. He was a man who lived by spreadsheets. He was in his back office, agonizing over the OTD numbers from the storm, when his phone rang. It was Helen Pierce, the airport director, and she sounded furious. "Richard," she said, not bothering with pleasantries, "what the hell is happening at C28? Who is Brenda Scaife?" "Brenda?" Geller was confused. She's one of my senior agents. A bit rough, but she gets the planes out." "Why?" "Because," Helen said, her voice echoing as she power-walked through a terminal, "she has apparently, according to the FAA, assaulted a federal inspector. She ripped up her passport." Geller's world tilted. That can't be right. A federal inspector? Brenda would have called me. She would have— Oh, God. Oh, God is right, Helen snapped. I am on my way to the T2 substation, where this inspector is being held by my police, who, by the way, are now in a world of trouble. You, get to C28. You secure your people. You tell Brenda Scaife she is not to move, not to speak to anyone, and not to touch her computer. Then you get to that substation. And Richard? Yes, he whispered. You'd better pray this is a misunderstanding, because Julian Cole just used the words pull your operating certificate in a sentence to me. And he wasn't joking. Geller ran. He didn't walk. He ran from his office in Terminal 1, through the underground tunnel, to Terminal 2. He arrived at Gate C-28, breathless, just as the last few passengers from the next flight were boarding. Brenda Scaife was there, looking normal. She was laughing with another agent. "Brenda!" Geller yelled, his voice cracking. Brenda looked up, surprised. "Rich? What's up? I got 881 out, just a few minutes late, and—" "Shut up, Brenda, just shut up," Geller said. He was panting. "Where is she?" "Where is who?" "The crazy lady. The cops took her. Good riddance. She was a total nut job, said I." "Brenda, what did you do to her passport?" Geller hissed, pulling her aside. What I was trained to do," Brenda said, her voice rising in defense. "It was a fake! It was peeling! I tested it and it fell apart. I'm writing the incident report right now." "Did you rip it?" Geller asked, his eyes desperate. It tore. It was a bowed forgery," she insisted. Geller looked at her, then at Tom Alvarez, who was hiding in the corner, restocking boarding passes. "Tom, my office. Brenda, my office. Now." "I can't," Brenda said. "I have to close this flight." "No, you don't," Geller said, his voice shaking. "You are relieved of duty. Effective immediately. Both of you. Come with me." Brenda's smug expression finally crumbled. "Relieved? For what? For doing my job? That woman was she was nothing. She," a new voice said, "is a senior inspector for the Federal Aviation Administration. And you," the man said, stepping forward, "are in a great deal of trouble." Two men in dark blue suits, with U.S. Marshal emblazoned on the back, had arrived. Behind them stood a very pale, very shaken Officer Kowalski. Brenda Scaife looked at the marshals. She looked at Geller. She looked at Kowalski. And for the first time, she felt the cold, hard certainty of true, irreversible failure. "Miss Brenda Scaife?" the lead marshal asked. "Aye," she stammered. "Please place your hands behind your back. You are being detained on suspicion of violating Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 1543, the willful destruction of a U.S. passport." The entire gate area, again, went silent. The other passengers, the other agents, everyone watched as the woman who had, just an hour before, been the queen of this tiny carpeted kingdom was placed in handcuffs. "This is ridiculous," she yelled, her voice high and panicked. "That woman was a fake. Geller, tell them. She was a crazy black woman in a hoodie. She threatened me." "Shut up, Brenda," Geller pleaded, his face ashen. "For God's sake, just shut up." As they led her away, she passed Tom Alvarez, her eyes, wide with panic and rage, locked onto his. "You," she spat. "You did this. You—" Tom just shrank back, and for the first time in his life, he found his voice. "No, Brenda," he said, his voice quiet but shaking. "You did this." The beige interview room at the T2 substation had become the airport's new center of gravity. It was, as Julian Cole had intended, the ground zero of the Code Samson. Iris sat at the table, calmly sipping her water as the room's population grew. First to arrive was Helen Pierce, the airport director, flanked by the O'Hare TSA Federal Security Director. Helen was a tall, imposing woman who looked like she could land a 747 herself. She entered the room, took one look at Iris's calm demeanor, and let out a long breath. "Dr. Thorne?" Helen asked. "I'm Helen Pierce. I run this airport, and I am so profoundly sorry. I have no words." "Miss Pierce," Iris said, standing to shake her hand. "Thank you for coming. I'm afraid this is a teachable moment for all of us." "Ma'am," the TSA director said, stepping forward. My people at the checkpoint. Did they—" "No, Director," Aris reassured him. Your team was fine. A little lax on the laptop out-of-bag rule. But no, this was not a TSA failure. This was post-security. The door opened again. This time it was a frantic, sweating Richard Geller. He saw Aris. He saw Helen Pierce. He saw the TSA director, and he looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Ms. Thorne? I'm Richard Geller. I'm the hub manager for Transcontinental. Brenda. My God, I had no idea. Geller launched into a stream of consciousness apology. It was a masterpiece of corporate speak, a symphony of unacceptable behavior, and not our standards, and comprehensive review. Aris held up a hand. The room fell silent. Mr. Geller, Aris said, her voice quiet but carrying the force of a hydraulic press. Save it. I am not a customer. I am not a passenger. Your apologies, your vouchers, we'll look into it. That is all part of the system I am here to audit. She reached into her scuffed JanSport backpack, which Officer Kowalski had dutifully retrieved. She pulled out a slim, leather portfolio. She opened it. My name, she said, her voice resonating in the small room, is Dr. Aris Thorne. I am Federal Inspector 009, Federal Aviation Administration, Office of Special Audits, National Red Team. She slid her real credentials across the table. The gold badge, the holographic FAA seal, the severe official photo of her in a dark blue suit, a stark contrast to the northeastern hoodie she was wearing. Richard Geller's blood didn't just drain from his face, it evaporated. He physically stumbled back, grabbing a chair for support. Helen Pierce closed her eyes. It was, as she had feared, the worst-case scenario. My audit, Aris continued, her gaze sweeping the room, did not begin when Ms. Scaife tore up my passport. My audit began 72 hours ago, when I flew into O'Hare from Denver. I have been observing your operations, Mr. Geller. I have been observing your airline's culture of metrics over safety. I have documented 47 separate minor infractions in the last 3 hours at Gate C-28 alone, from unsecured jet bridges to failure to provide disability assistance. Geller was speechless. He was beyond words. The passport, Aris said, tapping the ruined pieces, which she had laid on the table, was not the failure. It was the symptom. It was the catastrophic, criminal expression of a culture you, Mr. Geller, and you, Transcontinental Airlines, have fostered. A culture where an employee feels so empowered, so unchecked, so full of contempt for the traveling public, that she feels she has the authority to destroy a federal document. In public, in front of witnesses. She turned her gaze to Geller. So, tell me, Mr. Geller, is that part of the comprehensive review you were planning? Geller opened his mouth. A small squeak came out. He shook his head. This, Aris said, standing up, is what happens now. The U.S. Marshals have detained Ms. Scaife. She will be charged. My colleague, Mr. Cole, has already been in touch with your CEO, Michael Vance. Geller flinched. The call had come from Vance's boss. The FAA, Aris continued, is hereby issuing a formal letter of investigation to Transcontinental Airlines. We are grounding your entire O'Hare-based senior gate agent staff, pending an immediate, full recertification on federal document handling and de-escalation training, which my office will be supervising. Yes, ma'am, Geller stammered. And now, Aris said, her voice softening just a fraction, I would like to speak to the other agent, the young man. Mr. Alvarez. I had him wait outside, Geller said. Bring him in, Aris said. Tom Alvarez was ushered in. He was pale, trembling, and looked like he was walking to his own execution. He saw the collection of suits in the room, and his eyes went wide. Aris gave him a small, reassuring smile. "Mr. Alvarez, please sit down." Tom sat, perched on the edge of the chair. "My name is Dr. Aris Thorne. I'm with the FAA," she said gently. "I want you to know you are not in any trouble. I just have one question for you, and I want you to be perfectly honest." "Okay," Tom whispered. "You saw what Ms. Scaife did. You saw her intentionally destroy my passport. Is that correct?" Tom looked at his boss, Richard Geller. Geller looked at the floor. Tom looked at Aris. He saw her eyes, calm, steady, not angry, just waiting. He took a deep breath. The dam of his fear finally broke, replaced by a small, surging tide of courage. "Yes," he said, his voice clearing. "Yes, meant to do it." I saw everything. She called her a fake. She said, "This is what we do with forgeries." She tore it. She did it on purpose. She's a bully. She bullies everyone. The passengers, me, I was afraid to say anything. "I'm so sorry." Aris nodded, slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. That was all I needed to hear. You are not a coward. You were a victim of a hostile work environment, and your testimony is very valuable." "So," Tom asked, Am I fired?" Richard Geller started to speak. "Well, under the circumstances—" "No," Aris cut him off. "He is not fired." She looked at Helen Pierce. "In fact, I believe the O'Hare Airport Authority has a whistleblowers commendation program, does it not? For employees who report safety and security breaches?" Helen, catching on immediately, smiled. "Why, yes, Dr. Thorne, we do. A Safety and Ethics Award. It often comes with a significant bonus, and I'm sure immediate consideration for a position on the airport's own customer service team, if he's interested, with a pay raise." Tom Alvarez looked stunned. "Mr. Geller," Aris said, turning back to the manager, "your day is just beginning. You, me, Ms. Pierce. We are all going to your conference room, and we are going to wait for my team to arrive from the field office. And we are going to start the very long process of figuring out how rotten your operation really is." Aris left the room, the collection of stunned executives trailing in her wake. The unveiling was complete. The red team audit had ended. The real inspection was about to begin. The aftermath of the O'Hare incident was a brutal and systematic reckoning. The karma for Brenda Scaife was not gentle. She was charged for the passport violation, but Aris's full audit had uncovered something far worse: a corrupt cargo bribery scam that actively endangered flights. Faced with overwhelming evidence of her crimes, Brenda pled guilty and was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, losing her house, pension, and freedom. The consequences cascaded upwards. Her boss, Richard Geller, was immediately fired for willful administrative negligence and black-flagged by the FAA, permanently ending his career in the airline industry. Transcontinental Airlines was hit with a staggering $85 million fine and placed on a 5-year consent decree, a form of corporate probation forcing a complete FAA-supervised retraining of all staff. But there was positive karma, too. Tom Alvarez, who testified as the star witness, was hired by the O'Hare Airport Authority into a new safety and ethics role, protecting whistleblowers. And Dr. Aris Thorne? She filed her 450-page report, gave her testimony, and went back to work. 2 months later, she was in a new disguise at a different airport, once again looking for the cracks in the system. The work was never done. That is the incredible story of Dr. Aris Thorne and the gate agent who made the biggest mistake of her life. This story is a powerful reminder that the people we see every day, the customer service agent, the person in line, the woman in the hoodie, all have a story. But it's also a story about consequences. The systems that are supposed to protect us are only as strong as the people who run them. Brenda Scaife's small-time power, fueled by bias and corruption, ran headfirst into the ironclad integrity of Dr. Aris Thorne. The result wasn't just karma, it was a systemic reckoning. It's a true lesson in what happens when you abuse your power. You don't just lose your job, you can lose everything. What do you think? Was this a case of power gone mad, or a system that was destined to fail? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories of hard karma and justice served, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more true life stories just like this one. You won't want to miss what's next.